Raw diets reflect the natural diet that dogs, cats, and ferrets would eat in the wild. The meat, organs, bones, and fat keep their coat full and shiny, teeth clean, and weight stable, which is why many people decide to switch to raw. However, some pet owners can run into problems that they didn't expect when making the switch, and this can make them stop feeding raw altogether. It's a real shame because now the pet will miss out on all the benefits that raw diets can provide. But there's good news. With a few simple tweaks, these problems can be completely avoided. So let's walk through some so that your pet's transition goes smoothly. This first problem is not only one of the most common, but also one of the biggest reasons that pet owners abandon the switch to raw. Switching to raw food too quickly. I first discovered raw diets in 2016, right after losing one of my ferrets at just 4 years old. Desperate to keep my remaining ferret healthy, I started digging into nutrition. I read a ton and soon realized that the dry food that I was feeding my ferrets was packed with tons of harmful ingredients. Could this have been the reason for my ferret's death? I suddenly felt the urge to switch my other ferret to a raw meat-based diet right away. Drop everything, run to the store, and grab whatever raw meat I could find. Many pet owners feel this exact same way. But what they don't realize is that major problems can occur when switching your pet to raw too quickly. Specifically, adult pets. Why only adults? Well, if an adult dog, cat, or ferret has been on dry or canned food their whole life, their digestive system isn't equipped to handle an instant food change. So a rapid switch almost always leads to GI upset. I've had many pet owners come to me wondering if their pet just can't handle raw food. But once I walk them through a slower 2-week transition, everything changes. By the end of those 2 weeks, their pet is thriving on raw. But what does a gradual transition even look like? Here is a simple schedule you can follow and screenshot. But what about puppies, kittens, and kits? Do they need a slow transition? Surprisingly, no. Puppies, kittens, and kits have digestive systems that are ready to adapt to new foods. So instead of a 2-week transition like adults need, on the first day, start with a small raw meal for breakfast or dinner. They can continue eating some of their old food for a day or two, but most are able to fully switch within a few days. That said, what you feed during the transition matters a lot. And that brings me to another common problem. Feeding meats with too much skin and fat. When pet owners are shopping for meats to feed during the transition, it's easy to reach for ones that are familiar, affordable, and easy to find. And oftentimes, these are parts like skin on chicken thighs, 80/20 ground beef, or pork shoulder. These seem like a great option, so they add these meats to their pet's meal during the transition. But then, just when they think everything is going smoothly, their pet has diarrhea. What just happened? Well, the problem may not be the meat itself, but the skin and fat on that meat. This is tricky because fat is a dog, cat, and ferret's main energy source. But too much of it too soon can overwhelm your pet's digestive system. So what's the fix? Keep the meat lean during the transition process. Avoid fattier cuts like I just showed you, and instead feed cuts like skinless chicken breast, 90/10 ground beef, and lean pork tenderloin. Then, once they're fully transitioned to raw, you can slowly add in a bit more fat. Okay, I just mentioned feeding a bunch of different proteins: chicken, beef, and pork, which relates with another common problem that pet owners run into: offering too many proteins at once. I was just a week away from getting my new puppy, so I decided it was time to shop for his first week of raw meals. And I wanted to buy every animal protein I came across. Chicken, beef, pork, lamb, everything. I thought the more variety, the better, right? This is true, but when you're transitioning your pet onto raw food, too much protein variety in the beginning can throw the whole transition off. For example, you might suddenly see your pet developing loose stool even if they seemed fine before. Or they start itching like crazy even though you're sure they don't have fleas. Some pets can be sensitive to certain proteins, so if you introduce 5 different proteins at once, it's hard to know which one caused the reaction. So something to try instead is introduce each new protein one at a time. If your pet is eating a chicken-based dry food and doing well on it, feed raw chicken first. Then introduce a second protein in the next day or so. If your pet shows any signs of GI upset or itching, you'll know the culprit. Okay, so maybe you're transitioning at a good pace and adding ingredients one at a time. But are you feeding the right amount? This brings us to the next problem, which is kind of a 2-in-1. Feeding the wrong amount of food. One of the trickiest parts for a beginner is figuring out how much food to give their pet, both during and after the transition. And unfortunately, a lot of people just guess. She seems hungry, so I'll add a little more. Or, this looks like enough food, right? I've had so many pet owners tell me that their pet's weight fluctuated dramatically after switching to raw. And every time, I noticed it tracing back to the same issue, guessing how much to feed. But how are you supposed to know? Well, a simple place to start is with your pet's age and body weight. For most adult dogs and cats, feeding 2.5% of their body weight per day works well. So if your cat weighs 10 pounds, that's about 4 ounces of food a day. Simple enough, but now comes the next problem. What foods should go into that meal? Well, raw feeders try to mimic their pet's natural prey by feeding specific portions of muscle meat, bone, muscular organs, liver, and secreting organs. But here's the thing. The amount you feed of each part matters. It's kind of like baking a cake. You can have all the right ingredients, but if the proportions are off, you've got a disaster on your hands. A common example is accidentally feeding too much liver. You see, liver is extremely concentrated in vitamin A and copper, and consuming too much can quickly cause vitamin A toxicity and likely trigger diarrhea too. So where's the line between just enough and way too much? You may have heard of the 80-10-5-5 ratio. This is okay to start with, but here are the ratios I typically recommend. So going back to our earlier example, if you're feeding 4 ounces a day to your adult cat, you'll want to portion out this much of each animal part. Okay, you're feeding the right meats in the right portions and easing into the transition slowly. But there's something unexpected that happens during the transition that catches many people off guard, and your reaction could potentially make it worse. Panicking when your pet won't eat something. You're right in the middle of switching your pet to raw food and doing everything you can to make the changes as smooth as possible. At first, they're super interested in these new ingredients and end up eating everything on their plate. But then, on day 6 of the transition, they refuse the new meat that you add to the plate. Or worse, they turn their nose up at the entire meal. Honestly, this is a common bump in the road when transitioning to raw, and it's totally normal to feel frustrated by this. But please remember this. Do not let your pet sense your stress. Believe it or not, pets are sensitive to our emotions. When my dog Matsu hit about 6 months old and started going through hormone changes, his appetite noticeably dropped. He wasn't excited for his meals anymore, and that really stressed me out. I guess Matsu picked up on that, because I noticed he'd start acting anxious as soon as he saw me prepping his meals too. I understand it's hard, but remember, some pets just need some extra time to get used to new tastes and textures. And in Matsu's case, get through hormone fluctuations that affected his hunger. Instead of panicking, try these surprisingly simple tricks that can bring the excitement back to mealtime, like lightly searing the food to make it more inviting, cutting the meat into smaller pieces, adding a tasty topper to the meal like some treat crumbles or canned fish juice, and sometimes even feeding off of a different plate or in a different room is all it takes. When my cat Tangy was a kitten, he didn't always like chewing meaty bones. So something that I did was pulverize it with a meat cleaver to make it a little more easy to chew. After that, he loved crunching down on them. Speaking of meaty bones, the next problem is Buying the wrong meaty bones. Bones are carnivores' natural source of calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium, which are critical for strong bones and teeth. But they're also often misunderstood. Some pet owners avoid bones entirely, fearing that all bones will break their pet's teeth or make them choke. Others assume any meaty bone is fine to feed and grabs whatever they can find at the store. One group plays it too safe, and the other doesn't play it safe at all. And me? Well, I unknowingly fell into the second group. One evening, when I was searching for new proteins for my puppy Matsu, I found some goat meat chunks with bone attached. Goat isn't super common in the US, so I was excited and instantly bought it for Matsu to try. The next morning, I plopped it in front of Matsu, eager to see if he liked it. But as soon as he began chewing on it, my excitement disappeared. The bone suddenly looked way bigger in his mouth than it had in the package. He started chewing, clearly trying to figure it out, but it wasn't going well. His little jaw was barely crunching down, and that's when it hit me. The bone was just way too big for him. I felt bad, but honestly, I just didn't know what to look for at the time. And this is very common among new raw feeders. Take turkey necks. You see it at the store and decide to bring it home for your cat. But when you set it next to them, you realize how huge they can be. Then there's beef bones. They're easy to find, but their thickness can actually cause tooth fractures, even for large breed dogs. So how do you know which meaty bone is right for your pet? Well, you don't have to figure it out on your own because I've done it for you. My free raw feeding cheat sheet includes a complete list of safe meaty bones organized by breed size, so you'll know exactly what to feed. It also has ways to determine how much to feed your pet depending on their age and weight, and much more. You can download it in the link below.